Hello Dabblers of the Internet, JP here with the next battle report covering my progress at the Clash of Kings 2022 Australia tournament that was held in Canberra of this year. Now this is round 2, so if you haven't seen round 1, you can go watch that, because otherwise, spoiler warning, I will be discussing that as we do this. Now I say this every time, but just in case, there's a reason why there's two kinds of content on this channel. I share it with my wife, and that's why it's called A Couple of Dabblers. So she does her stitching content, and I do my wargaming, mostly Kings of War kind of content. So as long as you don't mind a bit of those in your subscription feed, then please give us a subscribe and watch on. So I was quite elated at having won my first game, and it was time to move on to round 2. This is the last one before lunch, and the good thing about having the next game around lunchtime is that you don't really have anything bookending you on the other end, so the game can go a bit longer. So suddenly the pressure's a bit off, because the pressure was got to play that first game right on time, but the second one, it's a bit more open, which is just, you know, easier on me doing all the pictures here. And I apologize to anyone that might have found it annoying, but everyone was really nice about it as I was taking pictures. I'm not sure if I said that last time, but they were very kind about it. So I'm going into the next game, and I'll just go briefly through my list right now, so that anyone that's coming to this video fresh can get an idea of what the army's doing. But if you really want an in-depth where I just kind of ramble about every single change and interesting tidbit of this one, go to the first video, which I'll link in the description and link up somehow in the video. So what we have, Chaff, which is the Gargoyle's troop. Then we have a moderate hammer in the Tortured Souls Horde, which have the item to give them striding just once per game. Then we have a regiment of Abyssal Horsemen with the Brewer's Sharpness, who are the true hammers. And then we start getting into all the monsters. So we have the Cronius, which helps me grind, because he now has that inbuilt healing. We have the Abyssal Fiend, who is just my major source of inspiring, and quite a chunky little dude himself. Not little, he's a titan. We have the Abyssal Champion with the Gnome Glass Shield and Wings upgrade. So it's not the Wings of Honeymaze, it's an upgrade that you can have as part of his profile. I think some people were a bit confused when I was playing. But anyway, perfectly legit, and he's a very good fixer. He just stops things happening. We have the Abyssal Warlock, and he has Bane Chant, because I just need a little more crushing, particularly on the next few units after Manifestation of Baal, who is just a flying disaster that just can get in all the wrong places, but you do have to play him quite well. Now, a big chunk of my list was dedicated to the formation, which is Khazar's Torment, and the main reason I needed that Bane Chant was to give these guys some punching power, and these are the Lower Abyssals, a regiment, and a Lower Abyssals Horde. You have to take those two along with the Despoiler Champion, and together they get a range of buffs that ultimately amount to things that are supposed to make them grind better. You got that Aura of Life Leech +2 coming from the Despoiler Champion, as well as he gains Inspiring. So if you keep these all together, he can give infantry that Life Leech. It doesn't go to everything, that would be far too good. And so the Lower Abyssals can benefit from that somewhat. And also when the Lower Abyssals die, they explode and do damage. But yes, like I said, the more lengthy description can come later. My opponent for round 2 was Michael and his Nightstalkers, and of all the armies, I think in Panathor, Nightstalkers are the ones I am most familiar with, at least their units and the way that they kind of work, and that's thanks to all the online games I had against Matt. So if you look back at my single battle report that I made against Matt and his Nightstalkers, you'll notice I mentioned the fact that we played a lot in Tabletop Simulator, so it's through this crucible that I've learned a lot about all these kinds of units, and I think it's the only unit in this entire army that I'm not familiar with is the Dread Fiend. Everything else I've seen in various guises and taken in various ways. So this list is broken down into 3 major components. So we have the Scarecrows, so 2 regiments of Scarecrows and 2 troops of Phantoms. And these act as that first wave, the screening. So whether they're jumping forward like the Phantoms, or they're just kind of in the way and blocking any charges that might go into the second wave, the Reapers. That's kind of what the Scarecrows do. So these are just both chaff kind of things, right? So that's the chaff component. And what are they protecting? Well, then that's the next bit. So that's the Reapers, for instance. So we've got 2 regiments of Reapers. They always need protecting because they have low defense. They do not like to get hit, but if they get their charges off, they are absolutely nasty. 25 attacks, hitting on 3s with crushing 1. Oh, and if you have a guy with vicious, then even better. But in this case, there's no vicious aura. But so that's generally what the Scarecrows are there to do, is to help the Reapers, whereas the Phantoms are acting as chaff for the rest of the army here. So this rest of the army I'm talking about are 2 hordes of Butchers and a horde of Fiends. So of these 2, it's the Fiends that really need the Phantoms to help them get where they need to go, because the Fiends have defense 4, so they're kind of a cavalry. They're quite fast, speed 8, but they hit on 4s, so hence the Brew of Sharpness was added here. So the Fiends with the Brew of Sharpness really require that in order to start competing against other kinds of cavalry, even though they do hit very hard. But that's just kind of the crutch that they kind of walk on, because otherwise hitting on 4s, as I'm sure everyone will know, it's supposed to be 50-50, but very often, well, I guess half the time, really statistically, half the time it's very much not 50-50. You know, you go in with your 25 attacks and you'll hit with 10, or you'll hit with 9, 8. And that's very dismal, because then suddenly you're thinking, well, the Reapers would do better, wouldn't they? But the Reapers aren't speed 8, so that's the main difference. But yeah, we also have 2 hordes of Butchers, one with MacLeod's Potion of the Caterpillar to give them Pathfinder, which just helps them get around, but the 2 hordes of Butchers are just there as a kind of durable hammer. That will take a while to get there. They can be a bit of an anvil as well, so these guys generally don't need so much chaffing, because they're just going to walk up. They don't really care about getting shot too much, because they've got stealthy, they've got defense 5, so it's anything, even lightning bolts going into them are going to have a tough time actually chipping away at these guys. So that's the main components of the army. Then what we have left are 2 Mind Screechers acting as support, mainly with their lightning bolt, so they're just sitting there, and their lightning bolt combined, they have lightning bolt 6 each of them, so that's 12 lightning bolt combined in these Mind Screechers, and with the Horror, who has lightning bolt 3, that's 15 lightning bolt in total. But what the Mind Screechers have on top of pretty much every other lightning bolt user in the game is that they have, I think they're height 4, or height 5, they have quite the vantage point from which they can cast their spells unimpeded. So that, if they're casting over their own units, such as your Reapers and your Scarecrows, there is no cover penalty for them, so they can just cast straight into the enemy with no problems. They don't have to try and get that those means of firing. Sometimes you try and open up a lane, or you put them out just a little bit in front just so they can see. They can sit right at the back and cast all the spells that they want. They do have multiple spells though, so they're not cheap, mind you. You are paying for the fact that they can fly and that they're that tall, and also you're paying for the 2 extra spells, one of which I know is Wind Blast 6, and I think the other one is either Mind Fog 6 or Enthrall 6. But I've never had it used against me, this 3rd mystery spell, so it can't be all that great. But then finally on this list we have the Dread Fiend, and this Dread Fiend, it acts much like any kind of small nimble monster, like the Lord on Frostfang, or I guess, kind of like if Manifestation of Baal couldn't fly. But the idea is that these guys can just charge in and tag something to hold it up, or to hit it and stop it doing something like, some shooting units. Something fragile, they'll just go right in and, probably eventually kill it, or at least hold it up so that, the rest of this army that, you've got the Fiends that will hopefully catch up very quickly, or if you're wanting to have the Reapers come in, then he can get in there. So he's a good little nimble character, and using these is, it can be quite tricky getting the most out of them, but they're definitely very powerful and different to other kinds of means of chaff, because you can do things like Phantoms charging in, but very often they're just not going to hit as hard or as reliably, because just the different melee stats. Even though they got more attacks technically, it's just, you're very unlikely to, not very unlikely, but it's quite unlikely that sometimes you just won't do any damage with them. So the Dread Fiend just has a bit more of that reliability, but he is just one little dude, so you can still get around him. But likewise, he can get around things. So yeah, the army is of all the armies that I could go against and then look at their army list, this is one I could just look at and kind of figure out exactly what was doing what. Whereas before with the elves, even though there's a lot of elves in this Clash of Kings tournament, I hadn't played elves very much, so it was still kind of new to me. Whereas looking at the Nightstalkers, I'm like, aha, yes, I know these components. So yeah, I was looking at this, and the only thing that was just giving me pause was just that there were so many things that hit really hard. So not sure how my grindiness will work against an army like this, because I did have one test game where I tried on Tabletop Simulator using Kaza'a's Torment, and I gotta say, it was the Torment that went right back at me because the Reapers went right through it. But then, that's not really a good measurement because Reapers go through most things, so using Reapers as a yardstick is not advisable, I feel. So let's get into the scenario. So the scenario for round 2 was Plunder, and Plunder involves loot tokens, so a bit different to your kind of objectives that we had before, or have had before, but the loot tokens, you pick them up, you lose speed, so you're going to speed 4, and you lose your ability to fly if you have it, and things like that. So yeah, you're carrying loot, right? You can imagine a treasure chest, a big, heavily laden treasure chest. But what makes Plunder different is that 2 of them are worth 2, so that's these big arrows, and then the remainder are worth 3. So this is, and which one is worth 2 is elected by each of us. So the first token goes right in the middle, and then the last 2 tokens are placed on the center line by each of us, one of which we elect to be worth 2. And, well, then you can see that unless you're going to try and really pack 3 on one side, it's almost equidistant, spread out. There's not really much player choice, especially when you've got to keep to either side of, say, some blocking terrain. So, and they have to be 12 inches from each other. So, yeah, ultimately, you can see that they're very moderately spread out across the table. And so, introducing the terrain, because I realized I didn't do that last time, so I apologize for that. Just in case, sometimes it's hard to tell maybe what's a hill. But what we have here are these green smudges. These are difficult terrain, so flat difficult terrain, so I assume like a bog or something like that. And then we have these brown kind of ovoids. They are the forests, as denoted by the trees. It's a bit sparse, but you know, they could be. You just got to walk carefully through it because there still could be tree stumps. You know. Speaking of tree stumps, that's what this giant, nice piece of blocking terrain is. So that's one blocking terrain there, which is the tree stump with the ruins in it. It's actually a really nice piece of terrain, that, and also this hut. So we've got another piece of blocking terrain there. It's kind of acting almost like an obstacle. Yeah. And what I've realized looking at this, it doesn't look like oh no, there are obstacles here. Yeah, so you can see that there's one obstacle right there. So that's in front, so there's a little fence, and then there's an obstacle that's kind of turned perpendicular to his army pointing this way. So we've got all the classic so it's 2 pieces of all kinds of terrain, and they're always making sure that these, well actually the hills, yeah, so the hills are not, that's also a hill here, sorry, but the hills are not in deployment zones either. Not that we can take too much advantage of them, because I don't have much shooting, and his shooting doesn't really care about hills. I mean, if it can be on a hill, so much the better. So the deployment, so you guys can get familiar with my army, in case you haven't seen it, but also his beautiful army. So I didn't mention that, but the models in his army, they're all just so vibrantly painted, and the selection of miniatures is perfect in that you can clearly tell what everything is. So right to left on this side, so on his left flank, he has his 2 chaff units, those 2 phantom troops, and like I said, they're escorting the Fiends. That's the Fiends behind them, the spider-like beings, and they look really cool. Then next to that is the Dread Fiend, also there to help them. So it's a whole Fiend delivery system that's happening right here. You've got the 2 troops of Phantoms and the Dread Fiend, all just here to block things up so that these guys, the cavalry, can come in and sweep everything away. I see what's happening. Then, moving on into the center of his army, we have the first unit of Butchers, and I believe this unit of Butchers was I think this was the Pathfinder one over here. That's why I put them starting in some terrain. So this is the non-Pathfinder Butchers. And I think these are Mias miniatures. I've actually never seen Mias miniature stuff in person before, and so seeing these, they've got these massive cleaver axes. They look pretty terrifying, these guys, actually. They've kind of got no face, but lots of teeth and big cleaving axes. They're really cool. And so that's the first horde of Butchers, and that's actually acting as a front wave for the fragile Reapers behind, so that's helping them get there. And then there's this unit of Scarecrows doing what Scarecrows normally do, which is sit in front of Reapers there. So there's the 2 units of Reapers right behind, in the middle. And I imagine that's because he can then either go to the left or to the right as he needs. And next to those, there's a little model there, that's the Horror, so that has the 2 spells. And then on the other side of this terrain, in its own little world, is the second unit of Scarecrows, which I assume exists to take tokens. The 2 Mind Screechers which are brilliantly painted beholders from the D&D range. I'm not sure which iteration of the beholder, but they're both very well painted beholders, and they just look really cool. Bright purple with yellow eyes, and it's just, yeah, they look perfect as mind screechers. And then your second horde of butchers. So they have, yes, I assume these are the ones with the Pathfinder, because they're going to be doing a lot of walking through that terrain, so not having Pathfinder would be kind of annoying. So onto my army. So on the left, and my army, I'll talk why they're deployed this way, because I can still quite remember. You know, some games you can't quite remember, it's a bit of a blur, but this one I do remember quite well. So I put down the gargoyles here, and that was with the intention of jumping up and maybe grabbing that token. Because if there's anything that's good for gargoyles, it's just, you know, jumping up and grabbing things, but as you'll see, I'm not going to use them very well. Anyway, so the gargoyles were here with that token in mind, even though it is kind of annoying having to grab that token, because then running away is far slower. But then on the other side of this blocking terrain, and I always make sure whenever blocking terrain is concerned and you have hordes and things that don't move so well, you line it up perfectly. You get that tape and you go all the way up and make sure that you can go past it, and maybe even with a little extra, maybe inch or something, so that you can pivot around. So I've put then my horde of lower abyssals and the regiment of lower abyssals then on the other side. This is kind of a pattern of my deployment, because between them, looking after them, here is Khaza'ar's. Well, this is Khaza'ar, so this is the Spoiler Champion with those upgrades that he gets from the formation, and the Cronius. And these two here essentially act to babysit these lower abyssal units, because they help them grind. The Life Leech helping, obviously, but then the Cronius actually helps with his direct healing that he can do through his temporal ruptures. He also helps by adding actual wounds, because the lower abyssals can't really be relied upon to kill anything, because they're just rather unreliable, but hitting on 4s and, yeah, I guess 25 attacks, but yeah, they're just not that great in terms of combat. So the real power comes from the Cronius going into the same combats if it can be helped. But I need a little bit more help on this side, so I need that Bane chant, so that's why I've got the Abyssal Warlock here. I mean, he's nimble, so I don't mind him going through this terrain. He's not going to be marching up, and he does have a Firebolt as well, so you can still pivot around here and shoot whatever needs to be shot. So that's my first little bit of shooting that I've got. The other sources of shooting, quite simply, the Fiend, which I have lined up right here to go past this hut. He's got Fireball 10. And then I have the Manifestation of Bel right on far right, as far as he can go, and he has Lightning Bolt 7. Not that shooting is a major forte, because yeah, I've got the Lightning Bolt, which is unimpeded by his Stealthy, but unfortunately both the Fireball and the Fire Bolts are going to be affected, so not great. Between these two monsters I have my Real Hammer, pretty much facing off against his Sharpness Fiends. This is my Sharpness horses, so we'll have a Sharpness off. But while he has more attacks, I do have the ability of hitting on 2s rather than 3s. And then with these Tortured Souls, I just put them right here, because I thought, well, they've got flying and they can just get over this, right? You know. But thinking back, this was probably the worst decision for these guys in deployment, because yes, they're just behind this, but unfortunately they're also stuck in this difficult terrain. So moving them around in here will be a nightmare, because if anything tries to charge the minute, or if they try and charge and they're still in it, which they very well might be, it's just detrimental to them, because yeah, well, I got their Strider, so I don't know what I was thinking, but I was definitely thinking of maybe moving up and then getting on the other side of that terrain to grab this token. So I thought, if I grab that one, grab this one, and then, you know, we'll see how the other ones go, because my hordes are moving up, I'll be able to grab a couple tokens. So hey, I entered a game with a bit of a plan, which is more than can be said for most games that I go into. So turn 1 went to the Nightstalkers. So everything has just moved up in a nice clear line. The only deviation from this straight up movement, so everything is really just in line, is that the butchers here, not really perturbed by the fact that I have gargoyles, are heading towards this 2-point objective. And I'm like, oh no, because my plan was just fly up, like they could just go straight onto it. But you know, I just can't do that. And I assume that's what he saw. He saw that I could just jump up and grab it and keep 2 points for the rest of the game, and just wanted to counteract it with a butcher horde, which definitely dissuades me from trying to do that tactic. Oh, and couldn't really see him, but here is my Abyssal Champion, right next to my lower Abyssals, facing directly against the Mind Screechers, because his sole purpose in life is to charge those Mind Screechers and shut down their shooting, because nothing else here really he'll help that much stopping. But if he can stop some Mind Screechers from doing their lightning bolts, that would be grand. So over here we can see this shooting has just about begun. We have the Mind Screechers, I believe, shooting at my lower Abyssals, and they did a nice 3 wounds, not too bad. But you know, these guys got regen and they have the life leech, so I'm not too worried. So it was a quick turn. Turn 1 now for me. So I also move up mostly in range. So let's go from the left. Firstly, with the advance of these butchers, these gargoyles, now not wanting to go there, have decided to just go on the hill. And I'm not really sure why I did this. I put them there thinking, oh, maybe I can angle something. Perhaps I was angling to maybe charge the Mind Screechers, but putting them on this hill was a very, very dumb idea, because now I am quite easily on the other side of this blocking terrain, in line of sight of the Mind Screechers. And you know what Mind Screechers are really good at, or Lightning Bolt in general is good at, is removing gargoyles. It's almost built for it. So whereas 3 wounds on my lower Abyssals is nothing to worry about, 3 wounds on gargoyles means you can get them off. You need to roll a 7 once. So I don't know what I was thinking. Instead, if I were thinking, what I would do is I'd move them here. Maybe at an angle or something like that, so that they can still get there and still threaten the objective and keep these butchers coming this way, which is, you know, is good for me, because that means they're just not going to be part of this fight, which then I can win here, because there's just scarecrows and some reapers over here, but not both reapers. I don't think both will come. So yeah, that was first mistake of the game, putting the gargoyles there. And if there's my mistakes are often gargoyle related, because they're still quite new to me. But the more I spot them, hopefully the more I'll get out of them in future. But I get my defense 6 gnome glass shield dude right out front here, which is actually what I thought he would try and shoot. I don't know why I was thinking that he might be tempted, but you know, you never know. If you could just lightning bolt him off, it wouldn't be a problem. But I put him here, and he is going to charge a Mind Screech. One of them, this one, that one, he's going to get a charge off to one of them. So that's him just flying up in front. The rest of the army, being the lower Abyssals, both the Regiment and Horde, just kind of move up together with the Despoiler Champion, and yeah, I've moved up my Warlock right behind, who'll get some shots off on something, but really not achieve all that much. And the Cronius has moved up quite a bit. It looks like quite far, but what I've done is I just want to test the waters in terms of, you know, what is his priorities, and I've just obviously made sure that none of these are in. Although I think maybe I was teasing that on the full wild charge with the scarecrows, but probably not. I think I was just out, so I was just, you know, putting him forward, because then he's in range of them, because he's speed 6, so he has a 12-inch charge, whereas these guys with speed 4 and wild charge D3 are 11. So just kind of, you know, putting the tendrils out there, being like, I could charge you, but I probably won't, because that would be very dumb, which is usually what I do with the Cronius. And maybe it would be fair that he thought I was that dumb. But putting him forward just meant that I could put some pressure on, while then the rest of the army can catch up. Now on this side, I've just moved Baal into the forest so that he can shoot through it. So just get some lightning bolts off, particularly on, you know, your phantom troops. They're the lightning boltable kind of units. Although they're better than gargoyles, because, you know, they're fearless. But at least they're much easier than all the other things that I could possibly lightning bolt in that army. And the horses have also just nudged into the forest so that they can actually see something. So yeah, that's just what they've done. And the Abyssal Fiend has moved up, but not too far, because yeah, lots of these things. The Dread Fiend is speed 8, so I didn't want to give up a charge to him. But I didn't mind being in range with my horsemen, because, well, it's a hindered charge for him. It's a hindered charge for the Phantom, so that's why they've kind of nudged up. And that's the same with Baal. And yeah, so here is, you know, you can already start seeing where I didn't really know what to do with the Tortured Souls, because I'd already abandoned my little project, which was go get that. What I should have done is, yes, move them up here and then just sit them there. for a turn, maybe 2 turns, look like I don't even know what I'm doing with them, and then just pop them over and get that, because it's 2 points. It's a 2-point token, so it's worth having a unit just sit there for 2 turns even doing nothing, as long as they don't get flank charged or something. So that's what I should have done, is just put it there, or even just to threaten the possibility about it. But instead I angled them this way, with the idea of, oh well, if you charge here you're going to get a flank from these guys, but really that's probably not as much worry as, you know, maybe a Fiend flank. I mean, these guys in the flank would be awful, but they're also going to be hindered. So I guess maybe this was a good move, but maybe later I should have moved them elsewhere. So this denotes my little firebolts shooting. So I got incredibly lucky shooting at this unit of scarecrows. So you can see I did 1 damage, which is phenomenal considering I've only got 5 shots and they're stealthy. So and I think I even have cover, so I'm hitting on 6s. Hitting on 6s, wounding at least on 2s, because I'm piercing 1 and they're defense 3. So yeah, if something does hit, it will probably wound. But the crazy thing is then getting a wavering, a double 6. Or did I need to live? Anyway, I still get it, and obviously these, yeah, they're wavered. Not that I was going to remove them, but if I did, this is the one weakness that people don't think of with Nightstalkers, is that first round of the game, their Mind Thirst means nothing, because they don't have any inspiring near them. So this is the one time that your shooting, while difficult, can really pay off, and something that other armies just don't have. So yeah, this is not really tactics, this was just complete luck. But the reason I chose this unit over every other is I know what can happen if I can hold up some Reapers, because the movement of these Reapers is purely at the behest of these Scarecrows, and if these Scarecrows can't move for a turn, these Reapers can't move for a turn, and so I was banking on that. I just didn't realize it would work. So how will he retaliate to my positioning? Well, this is now the after action shot. He's already getting into rolling some of the shooting, but seeing what is eventuated in terms of where I put my gargoyles, he's realized, well, I don't need to go for that token now. So the butchers have turned to face the threat that is the Cronius and the lower Abyssals and essentially half my army, while these guys being the Mind Screechers have moved back just a bit to get a clear shot onto the gargoyles. So from this vantage point, they can see straight to my gargoyles, which I perch nicely on a hill to, because if they weren't on a hill, if they were down here for instance, then shooting across his butchers would at least have rendered cover, which, you know, maybe I'll really survive that. But putting myself on a hill, now I'm height 5, they're height 5, and yeah, it's unfortunately that's how it works. So they're going to get lightning bolted, and that's sad. Then over here we have the Scarecrows just move up just a little bit, and these Scarecrows have just pivoted because those wavered. That's all they can really do. They're wavered, so they've just pivoted a bit, so that they're definitely not getting a flank. And you can see the arcs being measured here. On this side, we can see, yeah, this being held up. The butchers are now moving and angling towards this side of this terrain. So this terrain is really deciding where everyone has to go because they can't go forward. So they're just turning towards all my stuff to help the Fiends out. And what he has done is charged off with his Phantoms. Now notice he's actually really just like holding off with these guys. They haven't even moved. So that's interesting because I just don't do that, and maybe I should. There's times where probably I just should not move. Especially in this particular match where the scenario really just asks you to pick up the tokens at the halfway point. And with cavalry, moving to the halfway point is quite simple. And so it's a bit silly trying to always be moving forward. But you know, there's that nature of like, well, if I'm not moving them, then I'm not giving value. But yeah, so these guys have moved up just enough so that they were out of range, I think, of the horses. They moved back, while the Dread Fiend stayed in range because he thought, well, maybe charge my Dread Fiend, maybe charge the Butchers, which is across this obstacle, which would have been hindered. So yeah. But what did charge off was one of them. He fired off one of the Phantoms, and that's to Baal down here, which is a hindered charge. So yeah, and you can see that they're taking some wounds with them. So I didn't obviously record it because I'm silly. I didn't take a picture, but my Lightning Bolt 7 must have at least done 1 damage on them. But I didn't take a picture because I didn't get rid of them or do anything very notable. So that's what's happening on this side. And you can see, I like his wound counters. So he's got these spin down counters from Magic the Gathering like I do. But he's got these little platforms that they sit on, so they absolutely cannot roll. Very nice. So over here we see gargoyles, and then we see no gargoyles. 5 wounds, more than enough to reliably remove them. 3 waver, and then a 5 to remove. So, au revoir, gargoyles. I have used you badly once again. On this side we have, I think that must be the result of a bit of shooting, and the only shooting that could possibly come from is this horror right here. So he must have turned, used his Lightning Bolt 3 just to get some early damage off. Good on him. And then here, these guys in combat, well, they managed to do 2 wounds. So I was talking before about, oh, they might not do much wounds, but here's a hindered charge giving evidence that they can indeed do some wounds. So turn 2. 1 fight so far and lost some gargoyles. What can I do? Well, I keep moving up because for some reason I think I need to get the tokens quickly, but in fairness, when you have speed 5 infantry you probably do need to get them relatively soon. You can't leave them all that long. So my horde of lower abyssals has moved up to grab the token, and then in my nascently developing Kings of War brain I have used tactics, and these tactics I will divulge to my audience. It's the really annoying kind of thing where you give a flank but you don't actually give it. So I've turned them in such a way that yes, the only thing that they don't have my front arc, they have my flank, but they cannot fit in the gap provided between me and the blocking terrain. So a classic Kings of War tactic, but you know, perfectly valid in terms of he just can't get all the way around to my flank. That's a crazy charge, so it's all he can do. So this protects my unit for 1 turn, gives me the chance to grab that token, and yeah, so what I do after that is up for debate, but that's what I've done right there, is now moved them in such a way. So then everything else I've angled in just at the bottom of this wedge so that they're a bit out of range, or were you to charge them you would then get these guys in the flank, the lower abyssal. So that's the Cronius and my Despoiler Champion. So you can see the Despoiler Champion really doesn't do all that much, he just kind of sits there, and sitting there doesn't really achieve that much for him. And my Warlock just behind, ready to do some fire bolts that will probably have no effect. I don't think I'm going to get that lucky again. And these lower abyssals, not worrying about this side of the battlefield, have now turned to face the Scarecrows and Reapers over there, the formerly wavered Scarecrows, but will no longer be wavered. Now what I almost missed again is, yeah, my Abyssal Champion with his wings and the Gnome Glass Shield has gone for his first attack, and that is into this Mind Screech on the left. Why I picked one on the left, I don't know. It was 50-50, and the one on the left was glaring at me slightly more meanly than the other one. So into the left I have gone, taking out 6 Lightning Bolt for at least a turn. Now on this side, I'll get to this later, but yeah, I've done a counter charge with the Manifestation of Baal, which is nice, so it's not hindered, and I've got some regen off, so I even got my wounds back. Speaking of regen, the Horseman regenerated as well, and taking a leaf out of a book being maybe moving is not for you, I did not move. I just kind of, I think I must have moved them just a little bit up, but just enough to have range, I think, on the Phantoms here, on the Butchers, on the Dread Fiend, but not to be in range of the terrifying Fiends, so I don't want to have a multi-charge from them. And then I've also moved up my Abyssal Fiend like so, and again doing the cheeky thing of where I give them the flank, but not really giving the flank to the Butchers this time. I believe so, yes. I think, or maybe at least I was trying to do that. Now the real question marks that I've got here that look like the confusion when you get in Pokemon is what are these Tortured Souls doing? Because now they're really blocked up. Before it was okay, they had an opening, but them staying pivoted in this way was completely nonsensical because they can't see anything here. If I were to if charges were starting to come in thick and fast, like something charges the Fiend, something charges the the Phantoms just charge in, so the actual Fiends can get up. It's very confusing. I've got an Abyssal Fiend, and then these guys are Fiends, but bear with me. So if the actual charges really did happen, these guys can't contribute whatsoever, because they can't see through this giant chap. He's right in front of their leader point, so their ability to see anything on this side of the battlefield is severely hampered. At this point, what I should have been doing is then repositioning them to start either jumping onto this objective here, which they could clearly do, especially once the Reapers are off one way or the other, and yeah, be able to grab that objective. But instead I've just kind of, where am I going to put them? And yeah, this is how I ended up here. My previous plan right at the start, which was, hey, I'll jump over this blocking terrain and grab the objective eventually, was completely forgotten by this point. I was all into the fight, and the objectives, while kind of in my mind, that's definitely a secondary thought. So yeah, definitely remember your game plan with your miniatures when you deploy them, because otherwise you're just going to annoy yourself when you make your battle report in the future. And my picture zoomed in here, most likely to denote a fireball. There we go, yes, so you can see a couple damage was achieved on the Fiend, the Dread Fiend over here, just thanks to a cheeky fireball. On this side, I did manage to get some more damage off with my Abyssal Warlock, which is fantastic, so now it's up to 3, but I did not roll hot this time, so fair enough, I didn't waver them for a second turn. That would just be very rude, because yeah, those poor Reapers would just be waiting in line for yet longer, and Reapers do really want to get into combat. So speaking of combats, now Manifestation of Baal does sometimes struggle to get out of wet paper bags, but it seems like Phantoms were were no match for him, not more than a match. So yes, he is now free to terrorize. The Abyssal Champion that now flew into this Mind Screech, I didn't manage to get a picture of the damage that I did, but he did do some damage and managed to not do anything phenomenal, but disorder, which is the main point of him charging in there. So turn 3 for the Nightstalkers, and round 3 now. Now things are going every which way for the Nightstalkers. The first few turns were just, putting their tentacled, toothed feelers out, but now everything's happening. The second Mind Screech, the one that was not charged, decided to abandon its Mind Screech brother and head for this 2-point token, because why not? He's got unit strength, he can pick it up, and it's a perfectly good use for him. There's not much left to Lightning Bolt, and his Lightning Bolts by himself, 6 Lightning Bolts, not going to really swing the game either way, so I might as well get the thing that will win the game, which are the tokens. So if my Gargoyles were there, they could have done something, but hey, you live and learn. The rest of the army on this side, we have the Butchers being covered by, or chaffed by the Scarecrows. Is that the correct word? The use of it? Or they're being screened. That's it. They're being screened by the Scarecrows. So nothing can charge those Butchers, and the Scarecrows are in the way, and that's where Scarecrows like to be. But these Butchers will soon be ready for an attack on these lower Abyssals to get this loot token, which is a perfectly good target. Now, before I move on to the next slide, it's a bit hard to see, but you can see these lower Abyssals are now engaged. These Scarecrows that were once wavered, but now no longer, have jumped over to attack the lower Abyssals, and then the Reapers are at least now free to move a little bit. So they've just nudged up, but they don't want to really get in range of anything too easily. So they're staying back, and I don't think they want to get shot much either. So I think it was also trying to keep out of line of sight a bit. On this side, well, it clearly didn't work when I think maybe I did, yeah. So if you remember previously, I had said, well, I'm angling my Abyssal Fiend to not get a charge, but I think I tried and I couldn't quite wrangle it. But in the end I thought, well, it's not that big a deal because this is some terrain, and I believe these weren't the Pathfinder ones, so they're going to be charging me and hindered right into that terrain. So with that in mind, the Abyssal Fiend, while not as good as, say, the Archfiend in terms of nerve, he's still defense 5, 15, 17, so he can certainly take a hit. And the only problem is that this gap is not Tortured Souls sized gap, so the counter attack to these Butchers is not nearly as great as it could have been were I deployed slightly better. Maybe I had the Abyssal Horseman a bit further to the right so that there was some room, but alas, I did not think of this, because this was not where these guys are supposed to be. Anyway, enough chastisement of myself. I'll continue talking about Michael's very good plays here. So, as predicted, these second wave of Phantoms have jumped forward, as has the Dread Fiend, to protect the incoming rush of the Fiends that will definitely be coming next turn, and of the Reapers. So now all my hard-hitting units are now otherwise engaged, but in my, I guess, to my advantage is that all of these charges going in are hindered, so none of them are likely to be all that effective, and so it's up to the up to the Fiends to then do better, which will also be hindered because they've just got Brew of Sharpness, so they'll be going straight back to their 4s and losing their Thunderous. So this forest was very well positioned for me, that's for sure. So looking here, we can see this combat going on. Oh, and I didn't. The horror is still kind of just wandering around the middle. But the combat has commenced, and they managed to put 2 wounds on, which is pretty good for a regiment of Scarecrows. You don't really expect all that much. But these guys are defense 3, so they do have the upgrade of the 2-handed weapon. I didn't say that when I was introducing my list briefly, but they have the 2-handed weapon. So that does make them a bit more fragile as, say, Scarecrows. But also receiving 2 wounds was the Abyssal Fiends. That I did not expect, but when you're hitting on 5s, it makes life pretty difficult, even with your crushing 2. So yeah, only 2 wounds on the Abyssal Fiend, something I can definitely handle. And then another 2 wounds coming, well, I think it was even just 1 wound, yeah, because he already had 1 from his previous rendezvous with Phantom, so the Dread Fiend puts 1 wound on him, which is still good because it at least disorders him, so he's not going to just fly off and start hitting the Fiends over there. Not that I'd really want to do that, but it would be pretty funny because it would slow him down. But he would do also very well against the Reapers because they definitely wouldn't like being hit. Over here, the attack back, so he countercharged with this Mind Screech was ineffectual. The Gnome Glass Shield remains steadfast. And then over here, they get 1 damage on with the Phantoms. So even with a hindered charge, you know, they did pretty good. They did half as well as the hindered Butchers. So that tells you something. But yeah, I can see why Matt doesn't like Butchers. But these Butcher models are definitely worth bringing. So Michael, keep bringing them. You make them work. So it's now my turn to hit back. And 3. Well, here's a blurry action shot if ever there was one, and I've optimized these camera settings so that I don't get these action shots all that often, but here they are still. I have double charged the Scarecrows with my Horde of Lower Abyssals and with my Cronius. Now, I'm pretty sure that's exactly what he wanted, and I shouldn't have done that, but I thought if I am going to charge them at all, it needs to be with everything to remove them, and so that's what's occurred here. But really what I should have done, actually, is back up with these Lower Abyssals and get them away from the Butchers and keep angling for giving them flanks so that I could get a better fight later, because yeah, now I will kill them because that's what this is capable of, obviously, but I will now start receiving damage in the form of these guys hitting me. Now what you can't see, thanks to this tree being in the way, is that, oh look, the Abyssal Champion is no longer here. No, he is not. He has, using his ability to 360 charge, that is, you know, part of the good thing of being an individual, he has left this Mind Screech and gone off to tag the one that was going to get that 2-point token, because I cannot let that pass. I will have to, I'm here to fix up the mistakes that I made with the Gargoyles by having to now just bounce my Abyssal Champion between 2 Mind Screeches, so he has jumped off there. And I mean, the bonus is that this Mind Screech was not doing something for 1 turn, but now it is free to do whatever it likes. So that's unfortunate, but I have to stop this one. The one now going for the objective. Yeah, well, here's a picture. I'd already thought of it, but now you can see my cool little dude chasing down the Mind Screech. On this side of the battlefield, well, what's going on? We have the kind of the backup and then side charge of my Abyssal Horseman into that Dread Fiend. Because if there's anything that I now know about the manifestation of Baal into slightly combat-y monsters / characters, such as, if you remember, the King's Champion from the previous game, he could be there for a long time. Eventually he might win. He is worth quite a bit more. He is brutal, he has crushing 2, he's got a lot of things going for him, but I can't wait that long. He's too expensive to just keep there. I mean, he costs as much as these Abyssal Horsemen. So, the Abyssal Horsemen, so now I'm throwing in double to take out this Dread Fiend, and really hope that if I take it out, then I can just turn straight back to the way I was before and face these Fiends as before. So we've got this nice, yeah, well, he's gone. You don't want a flank of Sharpness horses, even if it is hindered. But that does leave these Phantoms open to do anything, but to me I'm thinking Phantoms, Phantoms, no big deal. So that is that. and I countercharge the Butchers with my own Abyssal Fiend. And the blurry action shots on the left hand side continue, but at least it also allows me to show you what else was happening, and that is that the blurry Despoiler Champion, along with the blurry lower Abyssals with the two-handed weapons, have gone into these Scarecrows to make sure they are gone, and that we can then accept the embrace of the Reapers that is surely to come. And the Abyssal Warlock, I believe, is now angling for either a Bane Chant, we'll see, or going to shoot at a Mind Screech. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be a Bane Chant, because why not? So starting off the combats, I once again failed to actually take a picture of the damage, but damage it I did. So far so good with those 5 attacks. It's always nerve-wracking going into anything with 5 attacks. Even if you're hitting on 3s, you just know that eventually you're going to see 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. And you're just going to go, oh, and cringe inside. But in this case, so far so good. Over here, unsurprisingly, now the crushing 1 lower Abyssals, along with the help of the crushing 2 Despoiler Champion, managed to destroy the Scarecrows. And what I then did was I moved forward a little bit with only 1 inch, and he just moved sideways. So the Despoiler Champion moved sideways to get towards this objective, hoping to get all the way, but I don't think he quite got there, while the lower Abyssals just moved forward. And also, unsurprisingly, we managed to destroy the Scarecrows that were there, and then I just decided to move my Cronius backwards so that there's not a charge that these guys can do just solely on the Cronius. Although that was kind of silly, because really the Cronius could probably take a charge from these Butchers, especially as they would have been not hidden, they got Pathfinder, but I think they could have taken it. So I was overprotective of him and just moved him back, when really I should have kept him forwards and made him choose between going for an objective or taking out a nasty monster. On this side, also to be expected, the Abyssal Horsemen very much helped in clearing up that combat, so now they are both free to face the front, as they have now done, ready to accept the Fiends into the forest. On here, with the Abyssal Fiend, I managed to do 4 damage, which is pretty good, because he's only got 7 attacks, but definitely not enough to get rid of them. So yes, it would be great to have the Tortured Souls in there, but I did not have them in there, unfortunately, because he could not see them. Still annoys me. Tortured Souls, you know, it's quite a lot of points there to just be wasted. JP. Turn 4 for the Nightstalkers. Will Michael take advantage of my mistakes? Well, he certainly did. The Butchers have freely gone to charge in, because now, with the ability of the Mind Screech to do whatever the hell it likes, it has charged in to chaff up my Cronius and leave the lower Abyssals all by themselves to take on a horde of Butchers, which is not going to end well. On the other side of this little part of the battlefield, the Despoiler Champion that went off his own to try and get a token is now met with the Reapers, who can now go right onto that token. So it's as if I invited them to this token. I'm standing next to them like, please, come and take this token. I don't want it. What would I do with it? So the Reapers have just sprung right past my lower Abyssals. They didn't care whatsoever. And they're going to kill my Despoiler Champion, because he's not that great insofar as taking 25 hits hitting on 3s. Poor lad. And you can see the Horror is right behind, ready to add some Bane Chant just to help them wound on 3s rather than 4s, because at least the Despoiler Champion is defense 5. And we have a countercharge here with the Mind Screech behind the terrain, but we just can't see that right now. On the other side of the battlefield, almost a completely separate battlefield it may seem, the Fiends have finally come into contact with my forces. So these Fiends, not the Abyssal Fiend. So the Fiends have charged the Horsemen, and that's a hindered charge as expected through that forest. What's not pleasant whatsoever is that now I have Reapers and Butchers into my Abyssal Fiend, and that is definitely not going to go well, because those are 2 punchy units, and this is a countercharge from the Butchers, so they're not even hindered anymore, if they were hindered, because I still can't remember if they had the potion or not. But then on this final combat, I didn't care about whatsoever. I was Tortured Souls getting charged by some Phantoms, and I thought, oh yeah, well, it makes sense, you want to hold them up, because next turn these Phantoms could feasibly charge any of these units, so yeah, why not make them disorder, make it hard for them to do something. That makes sense. So blurry action shot number 1 again. Actually, I don't think it's a blurry action shot. I think what's happening is that this terrain piece is forcing my camera's focus to go here. You know, the autofocus, when you press down, if you use these modern cameras, they kind of autofocus just like a phone camera. So yes, we've got a nice in-focus tree stump. But at least you can still see my dice showing that he's taken 1 wound. So good on your Mind Screech, you broke the shield. The shield is now broken. Down over here, well, my Abyssal Fiend took 9 damage, which, you know, actually is not horrendous. But 9 damage is still enough to get rid of him. And it did. Oh, and it wasn't even it wasn't even 9 damage, it was 17 damage by the end of that fight. Maybe, yeah, I must have taken that picture when it was just like the Reapers. I'm like, oh, 9 from the Reapers, and then the Butchers got in, and then it all broke down. I didn't break down, at least, and not yet. Because then, when we went to the next fight, well, you can see that they've repositioned, so the Butchers have now turned to face the Horsemen because they've had some blood and they want some more, so why not take out my True Hammer while the Fiends are currently occupied with them. So that's some good repositioning, while the Reapers are ready to charge and take out the Tortured Souls. So it all just seems to be falling into place. We've got the Tortured Souls ready to be taken out once the Phantoms have roughed them up a little bit. And if the Fiends struggle to take out the Horsemen, because they are hindered, to be fair, then it's okay, because we have these Butchers coming right in. And we're right about the Fiends being hindered. You know, they're gone back to hitting on 4s, and they've lost their Thunderous, so really they're going to be hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, and 25 attacks is not great, because, you know, that goes down to 12-ish, and then that goes down to 6-ish, and yeah, this is definitely under par. But yeah, that's just what happens when you have hindered Fiends. Not great. On the other hand, plenty of damage went onto the Abyssal Champion, so yes, he's gone without having really done all that much. I mean, he helped kill some Scarecrows, so points to him. But definitely not looking favourably upon this formation so much anymore, because yeah, that one thing that makes the formation kind of good is that he's got that life withdrawer, and if he just dies, it's not so great. Maybe I should be protecting him more, but also he does nothing if he's just standing around. So yeah, perhaps I just need to use him a bit better. But over here, the Phantoms, who I think they have 8 attacks, 9 attacks. Anyway, they go in and do 6 damage on my Tortured Souls, and I was like, oh, 6 damage. Well, I mean, I am -17, so that's very unlikely. You have to roll an 11. But now things are not so good. My Inspiring Source on this side is gone. There was once an Inspiring Source, that was the Abyssal Fiend, but he's gone. So he only needs to roll an 11 once, and he does. He does. So a Phantom Troop charges in, does a phenomenal 6 damage, and then rolls a super good nerve roll, and they're gone. Au revoir. I tend to speak French when I lose the things that I like, but I really like my Tortured Souls because they got better. But they didn't get better with me involved. So yeah, I've only got myself to blame of just not being able to use them and then losing them to Phantoms. So you can see why I was so bitter about my Tortured Souls the entire game, because I just didn't do anything. Well, turn 4. How can I get this back together? So you can see that the lower Abyssals, I didn't actually say how they went at the end, but they managed to take that damage up to 4 here, and they're quite good. So they're just going to countercharge, and my Abyssal Champion is just going to countercharge there. But what I'm pretty happy about is how I have now done a flank charge with my Abyssal Warlock. So yeah, he's just a spellcaster, but people tend to forget he actually has 5 attacks. They don't really do anything great, it's just merely 4, no crushing, but it's still 5 attacks. So in a flank, 10 attacks, not too bad. So I had the flank there. But obviously he decided that giving up a flank to my crappy lower Abyssal Warlock was better than giving up a flank to the lower Abyssals with Crushing Web. So they get to go in the front. But I think these two things combined, well, maybe I might get somewhere. On this side, I'm quite pleased with some of my tactics. So yes, I'm alone. We're now surrounded. There's all these kinds of hammers every single which way, and I lost Tortured Souls to Phantoms. But what I did do was that, because these guys had charged in here and my Manifestation of Baal was right on the edge, his leader point was just slightly into these guys' flank. So he managed to get just a zip around to their flank, thanks to his now flying, because he's no longer disordered. So he's got their flank, the horsemen are in the front. I reckon I can get rid of them, especially since it's a counter charge with the horsemen. So while they don't have their thunderous, they're not hindered, so they're hitting on 2s. And so that's exactly how I like my horsemen. Oh, and obviously I did countercharge with the Cronius. And the Cronius managed to do a whopping 9 wounds. And you can see also the wounds starting to pile on thanks to the Cloak of Death kicking in. So yeah, I think he must have done 8 wounds, because there would have been that 1 wound already. But yes, the Cronius is taking names, and you can see he's healed these guys up to 3. So now they've gone down to 1 damage on them instead of the 4 that they had before. So Cronius is doing his job, and my lower Abyssals are still here, so that's pretty good. But the lower Abyssals themselves don't manage to do all that much damage. In fact, I think if this is telling me what I think it is, it's 1 damage? Yeah, it was 1 damage. There was no other slide, so I did no damage. Yeah, it must have been no damage, because that was the Cloak of Death. So, like I said, 25 attacks sitting on 4s. 4s is dangerous stuff. It can go any which way. But yeah, I came back here to take a picture of my reform, because that is important. Because I did kill them, yes. So the fiends are gone, and now I can accept the charge of these butchers. And it will only be butchers, because everything else is facing the wrong way. Apart from, I think, yeah, these phantoms look a bit hard to tell, but their arms look like they're outstretched in this direction. So I will be accepting hindered charges from phantoms and butchers, but that isn't so nearly as bad as still being stuck with fiends and getting them in the flank. Now down over here, I managed to put about, looks like 7 wounds on them, so that's pretty good. These are both subpar melee units, but you can take what you can. But I don't think I got rid of them. So it's on to turn 5. I've managed to start scraping back, but what is Michael going to do in response? Well, the grind continues, and in very good Kings of War fashion, the Mind Screech here has done a corkscrew charge. It's on that nice square base, so it could see these guys, and it just went bang right in. Although, yeah, I know it can do that. Can it? Yeah, it's height 5. Not sure. If he was in combat here, can he charge these guys if his leader point is completely obscured by something of a similar height? Not sure. But anyway, I think it's still a pretty good move, and if this guy wasn't so tall, I'd definitely be sure it was possible. I can't be sure right now, but it's not time to judge these things, because it was a flank charge, and these guys have got a couple of attacks too. I think also 5. It's kind of it's a caster, so it's got some punch in there, but no crushing. But yeah, in the flank to help out the butchers, because I think he realized that maybe the butchers are not going to get through this fight on their own, because hitting on 4s means that even though they have their crushing 2s, they're wounding on 2s, it just means that on average they're doing about 9 damage, and when you've got a horde that can regenerate, 9 damage is just slow. It's going to take a while to build up enough to reliably take them off, especially if there's still the inspiring nearby, such as this guy. And the countercharge over here continues against my Abyssal Champion, so the Abyssal Champion is now firmly stuck in this fight. Over here we can see that the Phantoms they're kind of a crisscross. So the Phantoms have gone over to hold up Baal, while the Butchers have gone in to start getting some damage in on the horses. So that's fair enough. And then the Reapers have repositioned so that they're ready to take out whichever one may still be surviving, and whichever might get through. Because right now, I know they can see all of them, so they can still do a multi-charge onto whichever one, I guess, needs that extra damage. So it's quite a good situation for positioning over here. So right down here we can now see this combat in all its glory, and the damage is getting put on, and they get up to 13. But there's still, they're 20-22 in terms of nerve, so you need a 9 twice to get rid of them. So they just got wavered, so that's pretty lucky. Wavering's fine for them, in case you're wondering, because they have Fury. A lot of the Abyssal units have Fury, which is great, and so Fury coupled with Regeneration, not too bad. Over here, I have received my second point of damage from a Mind Screech. This guy broke the shield and he got Taste of Blood, and he got a little bit more. But like I said in my first video, the Abyssal Champion can take quite a bit of damage because he's got regen, and a high nerve of 13-15. Now over here, the counter attack of these Reapers onto my poor lower abyssals was successful, because I didn't manage to kill them. 7 damage is not enough, and so now they've turned to my singular Abyssal Warlock, who is now facing them down. The one good thing about losing those lower abyssals is they do have that Kaza'az maggot effect, so they explode when they die, so that D3+1 hits that cause frozen, and they have piercing 1, so that's good, but you can see these guys have the token, so that's bad. So you win some, you lose some. Over here, this 2 damage on Baal is the 2 damage that he already had from ages ago, from the Dread Fiend. So these guys have flown in, and unfortunately, unlike their previous brethren who managed to kill all sorts of things. Oh no, these are the same ones. They've just gone around all over the place. Well, they didn't. Their luck has finally run out, so they managed to do no damage. So I am completely fine. I'm not disordered whatsoever, which is how you want Manifestation of Baal to be. Whereas over here, I've taken a number of damage. So I think I was on 1 and now I'm on 6. And so yeah, it's not enough to get rid of me, but it's definitely not good times over here because the Reapers are just on the horizon. So again, it's yeah, kind of always on the back foot when it comes to my games. But here we are, turn 5. We're getting to the tail end. So with my Nimble, I charge my Manifestation of, so it's a double charge of Manifestation of Baal and of the Horseman into these butchers. It's a hindered charge for Baal, obviously, because the forest, we haven't left this forest since the start of the game, but I think, again, their combined efforts might be able to get themselves out of the situation. Over here, I could not ignore this tasty flank of a Mind Screech, so I've flank charged the Mind Screech with my Cronius, and my well regenerated lower abyssals have gone back into the butchers to maybe actually do some damage, but who knows, you know, they're just pretty dismal. And I don't think I've put on the Cloak of Death yet. But yeah, you can see here that was formerly 13, now they're down to 6, so that's definitely above average regeneration. The one other thing I did was make sure that my Warlock, the single inspiring source for the whole portion of this army, unless I want to bring my Abyssal Champion back from his sojourn over to the other side of the battlefield, is this Warlock. So I've gotten him out of the front arc of these Reapers. I was thinking of maybe just trying to hold them up, act as a chaff for the Reapers, but what I'm hoping is that the Cronius can finish this off and then turn to face them, and then hopefully not die to a Reaper charge, but yeah, that's what I'm hoping. And here's just showing he's countercharging once again, so he's just getting stuck in. But he's done pretty good. He's held up this Mind Screech and stopped him getting this token. Now if only I could have got it. Oh well. But in a change of pace, he's decided to finish it off, getting fine. These are all his wounds. So he got him up to 8 wounds, and then finally the Mind Screech perished. He routed, and so my Abyssal Champion is free to bring a reign of terror to the rest of the battlefield. Looking pretty badass there, isn't he? Also free are the Abyssal Horsemen. They managed to take out those butchers with the combined efforts of Manifestation of Baal and the Horsemen hitting on 2s. This time I think I have correctly just backed up my Manifestation of Baal so that he is not quite so chargeable as some of the other units. I think if the Phantoms get out of the way, I think I still could get charged. I'm not quite sure why I was doing that, but you know, that's where I've gone. I've backed up a little bit, and I'm not even out of the forest yet. And over here, the Cronius was able to polish off that Mind Screech as well, so both the Mind Screeches are gone, and he is now facing the Reapers. I'm almost forgetting what they're called. But as expected, the lower abyssals just don't do all that much damage at all. The 25 attacks, you know, they hit on 4s, that's okay, but they're wounding on 5s. Not okay. Although in this case, I've got a Bane Charm. You can see the Bane Charm token. So hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, 6-ish damage, but I get 4 damage. Maybe even 3 if I remembered my Cloak of Death. But, you know, remembering that Cloak of Death, you know, it takes... I've got to use this Cronius a lot before I'll make it a habit. So turn 6 for the Nightstalkers. So I'm slowly crawling back, but it just takes the Nightstalkers one more round maybe of doing quite well. And so that's what he's done. He's completely ignored my Cronius, which I turned to front and be like, hey, charge my Cronius, he can take it. He's like, no, I'm going to go for the thing with the token so I can have 2 tokens. And fair enough. So we've got a double charge here. We've got, again, the Butchers going in one more time, but it's the Reapers in the flank. You know, that's 50 attacks. Yeah, you don't recover from that whatsoever. Especially these guys are not hindered at all, so in they go, and goodbye. What should I have done to stop that? That's when the Warlock should have been in the way, because that's when I should try and protect these guys. Because they were doing pretty good. They were, you know, holding up, but no longer. And just to add insult to injury, there's a little horror here. He's a real horror. Has lightning bolted my Warlock, because, you know, getting rid of the Warlock would also be pretty good, because then I would have no inspiring. But the Warlock sticks around. Now on this side, not so great. Since by backing up, what I've done is invite myself a flank charge from Phantoms. And these are the same Phantoms. They keep haunting me, which is ironic, you know, because they're ghosts. They're the models. So the Phantoms get a flank charge on my Baal, and then the Reapers go into the front. And I can't be sure if this is the damage that's done to them, because the damage has changed. So I believe, yeah, I must have taken 2 damage here. Perhaps. Yeah, so that must have been the damage, but the Reapers definitely didn't have any trouble getting rid of the Horsemen, and so now Baal is over here by himself. Old Baal himself. Sorry, that was bad. Should I delete that? No, I'm too far into this. And also being deleted were the lower abyssals, but at least, again, they get to leave their nice memory, which is when they die they explode, and this time these guys being the Reapers, have received 2 lower abyssal explosions, so they're up to 13 damage. So there's not very much left that they can survive. So I might be an easy firebolt away from removing that unit at least. So turn 6, time to capitalize on those weak Reapers and then commiserate on the other half of the battlefield. So, instead of firebolting, because that's with stealthy, I thought, why not attack in? Because actually, you can't really tell, but he hasn't been able to reposition them much. Oh, I think I know why. Because he either would have to face around completely, one way or the other, because my Cronius was flush with them. So I don't think they could move all that well in terms of repositioning. So it was either one way or the other. And so this time a rear was given to my Abyssal Warlock, who readily took it and it's gone in. So yeah, that's 15 attacks. Hitting on 4s, no crushing, but still 15 attacks. At the same time, I've decided to move my Cronius away from all of this danger, because he still has unit strength, he's pretty good too, and I've just charged off into the the regular horror over here. Now to hold up these Butchers, to make sure that they maybe don't do anything, I've sent in my Abyssal Warlock. Not Abyssal Warlock, Abyssal Champion. I don't expect him to do all that much, but you know, just charging in helps him get into the fray here. So yeah, that is the situation that we've got here. So when rendered free of this all combat, I decided that Baal needed to get out, and so the only way, because so he needed to get out, and the only place he could walk to was here. So he went across to be out of their arcs, both of them, and just generally just try and survive. So Macronius is attacking here and not doing all that much, so I was getting quite disappointed that he couldn't kill a single horror. So now we've moved into a bit of crazy territory. So completely expected that the rear charge from a Warlock, 15 attacks, can take out a very weakened Reaper unit. So yes, they're gone and I take the token. Unexpected though is that charge from the Abyssal Champion, who doesn't get any multiplication of attacks because he's an individual, he just comes in with his 5 attacks, managed to put enough damage, getting into the double digits we can see here, enough damage on those Butchers to straight up remove them. They're gone. And I must have rolled it twice because he is inspiring, the Mind Thirst was engaged, but I managed to kill it, so that is some craziness. But you know, it all balances out. I lost my Tortured Souls to Phantoms, and he loses his Butchers to a single Abyssal Champion. But you know, the Butchers already had 7 wounds on them. But so now, I have a token, and that's the only token that's been picked up so far, so that puts me at a bit of an advantage. But we roll into turn 7, so there is still a chance that I could lose it all. But we realised that the only way that he could stop this all from happening was if his horror could do is 1 damage onto my Cronius and disorder it so that he could not march, according to this big arrow I put here to remind myself, onto the 2-point token and take it in my turn. Because he has moved around his Reapers to grab that token there, so he's got 1, but unfortunately the Phantoms couldn't make it all the way onto that token, and so it was left there out in the open, and my Cronius can easily just go at the double and grab it. And so that was the final photo, because we were both very hungry and wanted food. But there you go. It just shows again that my army, when it did get to this winning moment, just like in the previous game, it came down to the big monsters at the end. The units have all long gone, and all that's left are the monsters here to try and scramble on the objective. And it just so happens that these objectives are doable with these kinds of monsters, because if it was more unit strength on the battlefield than me kind of deal, he still has his unit of Reapers. They count as unit strength, so if this was control, it'd be different. But anyway, somehow, with my monsters being in the right places at the right time and taking out the right units, I managed to get the objectives that I needed. Now, this could have been all much easier for me if I'd played better with my gargoyles at first. So that's a lesson there. Use those gargoyles better. If you are going to use them to get objectives, which is a very good use for them because they're very low points, so they're perfectly reasonable uses for taking objectives, just like a regiment of zombies or a regiment of rabble. But you just got to do it well, so don't just give it away to some mind screechers, for instance. You got to position them correctly. And then the same with the Tortured Souls. I had a plan for them and I didn't follow it. So in both cases, when I was at the start planning for something objective base at the start, I didn't follow through with it, or I tried to do it too early. Because really, this is only in these final moments that it really matters. So if those gargoyles are just sitting behind a hill, sitting behind the hill, or behind a blocking terrain, and then they finally just go, bloop, I'm going to take it on turn 5, and then start wandering in a direction, that would have been fine. But instead I just put them on that hill too early. So I want you guys to learn from my mistakes, because that's why I lambast myself for them, and then hopefully in the next battle reports as I go along, I will not make them, and you'll see better things, better games, ones that are more like Andy 2d6s, or Death by Dragons, or Death by Riley. That's not how it works. Invisibly Riley. Because those are games that I look at and I try and learn from, and you can learn from these insofar as what not to do. I hope you don't mind these kinds of games. But yeah, so far 2 wins. 2 wins at Clash of Kings. This is the first day. There's 1 more game to go on this single day, and now I get to enjoy the wonderful food that is available at this venue. And so it's on the up and up so far. So we will see soon when I record the next video. I'm getting through them relatively quickly before my mind forgets them. But I think I've taken enough pictures that it's quite easy to put it all back together. So yeah, let me know if there's anything else that I could have done better, because I've pointed out a few things, but I'm sure there's others. And also if there's just some things that Michael could have done differently, then I'm sure he might not like to know, but I like my criticism to be constructive, so maybe some his way as well. But it was a close game, as you can see, and it just really came down to some of those last few rolls. But there was also some crazy rolls here, but no double ones, but still some pretty crazy high rolls. So anyway, until next time, everybody keep safe. Bye.